Right, hi everybody. So it's great to be here. So the overview of the panel. This is a panel about non-terrestrial networks and how satellite will work with cellular LPWAN. So we're going to talk about how LEO satellite solutions will enhance 5G IoT technologies and enhance coverage for IoT solutions. But really we're going to focus on how these two things work together. So I'm Jim Morrish, I'm founding partner of Transforma Insights, and I would like to welcome up to the stage, because it's feeling a bit lonely for this panel, I'd like to welcome Parth Trivedi, who is CEO and co-founder of Skylo Technologies. Parth. I'd also like to welcome Marco Guadalupi, who's Chief Technology Officer of Sateliot, and Jens Olejak, who is head of Satellite IoT Program for Deutsche Telekom IoT, and also Steve Szabo, who is Vice President of Business Products, Verizon Business Group. So thank you guys, welcome. Good. So to start off, so we've heard about 5G, we've heard about eSIM, we've heard about developing SIMs. We haven't spoken about anything in space yet today. So non-terrestrial networks. What do we mean when we talk about non-terrestrial networks? And Parth, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Shane and GSMA for inviting me to the panel. When we talk about NTN or non-terrestrial networks, we're actually largely referring to satellite, although in the 3GPP context, it can also include high-altitude stratospheric platforms in the atmosphere. And frankly, the key for non-terrestrial networks is the use of cellular native protocols and a cellular native tech stack for enabling satellite, as opposed to using bespoke proprietary satellite protocols. And that enables now the use of cellular hardware for satellite communications.
Okay. Sounds interesting. It sounds like a big step forward, and certainly using the cellular stack and then using that to communicate with satellites should make things nice and simple. But why is this happening now?
So Jim, to me, there's a demand side and there's a supply side to this equation. Mm-hmm. On the demand side, people are now demanding connectivity not only where they live, but also where they travel, where they work. And you saw in the previous panels that agriculture, mining, maritime, all of these are very important industries that need to stay connected in an IoT perspective. The other thing on the supply side here is the cost of sensors has now dramatically fallen, 30 cents on average now for the average sensor. And that is enabling now data to be collected from geographies like farms that previously just wasn't viable. The other thing that we're seeing, frankly, is when we look at the enablement of this from a cellular perspective, it turns out that there are certain benefits that the cellular industry has created, for instance, in the narrowband IoT protocol that we use for satellite connectivity. The use of repetitions as an example, which is a cellular native feature, which allows satellite to now happen very cost effectively using cellular hardware. So to me, that is a new function of the ratified 3GPP standards which has come about as part of Release 17. And also on the supply side, now there's plenty of capacity that's already available from the space segment, right, which wasn't the case a decade ago. And regulatory bodies are in support of NTN for all of the massive public sector benefits, the safety benefits and the productivity benefits that come about when you use NTN. Okay. That's what's causing the inflection point.
Good. It sounds pretty compelling, and certainly, some of those core native cellular concepts sound very applicable to satellite. I'd like to move on though to Marco. What really are the advantages derived from a kind of a fully standardized integration between the terrestrial and the satellite? And I'm thinking both from the perspective of operators and also customers.
Mm-hmm. First of all, I think this standardization brings us the possibility to adopt all the ecosystem that already exists around 5G. Okay, when we were thinking on how to help unconnected area to reach the environment of artificial intelligence, the advantage of IoT, the advantage of broadband, you have to think of the possibility to deploy something that is cost effective. Okay? Cost-effective means a lot of elements, not only the network from the operator point of view, but also the sensor from the customer point of view. To reduce the cost of the sensor, based on my previous experience in broadband, it's clear that a standard solution that can spread around all the terrestrial network, that can be used also under coverage by satellite, of course, has an important impact on the cost of the elements. So that impact then reduces the cost of the monthly fee for the customer. So all of them are big advantage, because it's the first question when you deploy an IoT application, which is the cost, the monthly and the CapEx when you implement your devices.
Okay. So lots of costs and flexibility benefits in there. Thinking primarily of a network operator's perspective, Steve, can you talk about the benefits of working with satellite partners that are using 3GPP technologies?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we participate very heavily in the standards body. That's for a reason, right? We want to get to a place where we can actually maximize and scale technology and provide our customers with, especially with satellite, with the type of footprint they're going to need to operate. So when we go with the 3GPP for us, we have to think about interoperability, compatibility, and of course, we have regulatory, issues that we have to make sure that we follow guidelines for. If we can align on a standard which everyone's working towards, it makes it that much easier for us to partner together and provide seamless services. And I saw in the G&D keynote, they said managed connectivity. As IoT gets more and more scaling, I mean, the sensors are getting cheaper, we can collect more information, we're doing more with outcomes, insights, et cetera. If we follow a standard, it actually makes it easier for us to take the, our network infrastructure with satellite and make it easier to integrate with the solutions that we're providing our customers and make that part of the solution offering. So that's a big deal. We have our ThinkSpace IoT platform, our ability to connect and manage and touch all device endpoints and manage them from a perspective of our customer's point of view, collect data, see what's happening. The standards will allow us to do that in a much faster and greater pace of reach. So, for us, I think it's a necessity, quite frankly, to get there so that we can scale and take advantage of the technology.
Good. So standards means faster, cheaper, more scale, more quickly. Yeah. But moving on, Jens, I'd like to talk about where some of that scale comes from. Who is it who's going to be making use of these new capabilities? Is it going to be, are they going to be most impactful in the context of productized solutions or even consumer devices, or is it going to be highly customized and niche solutions? What does the opportunity look like?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the interesting point that we're seeing now. So satellite communications has been out there for many decades, of course, and the big change we're seeing is something that my colleagues have already highlighted. So there's more satellite capacity, it's becoming more affordable and of better quality, and we have a standardization, which means that there's a convergence between satellite and cellular networks, and that's the interesting part, and that's why we, for example, have intensified our efforts in this. So the answer is, we're not looking at specific custom projects, we are looking at really scaling it for the mass market. So in my case, I'm talking about IoT mass market. So we're not only looking at some exotic use cases, we're looking at basically every use case, any outdoor rural use case. Of course, in urban areas or indoor applications don't need satellite connectivity, but especially in mobile devices or massive IoT sensors deployed in different parts of the world, it's excellent that we now have the opportunity to augment our cellular networks with satellite networks to make to fulfill the promise at last of always connected devices.
Okay, thank you. And coming back, Parth, to you, which industries, sectors, applications, which do you think are going to benefit most from these new capabilities?
So, Jim. First and foremost, Vincent took out a phone from his pocket and showed it to you. And we are all consumers in this room, so the most obvious thing to talk about first is consumer. And whether your car breaks down or whether you're Tom Hanks in Castaway, you will always be within reach. I think that is going to be a generational change. It's going to be something you just take for granted, and that to me is incredible. But then as people and industries start to use data from previously unviable geographies, I think you will start to see not just transformation in safety, but also in productivity and new business models. And I'll give you a few examples. In the past 3 weeks, I must have met 4 separate cattle tracking companies using our service. Mm-hmm. And that to me is remarkable in the millions of cattle that need to be in livestock that needs to be managed effectively. We did trials on the maritime sector with fishermen in the Indian Ocean, where when we enabled them with connectivity for the first time, they started with location tracking. But then they quickly realized that with two-way messaging, they can start selling their fish, their catch, before they even reach the shore as a forward contract. So that completely changed their business model. That to me is very exciting. So asset tracking, location tracking are sort of obvious. Supply chain itself is such an obvious use case for this, where you can now increase resilience across the entire global supply chain. And the big thing that we have unlocked here is form factor and battery life are no longer constraints. You're not adding extra hardware to make this possible. So just to give you an example, we have now connected cellular labels, printed cellular labels that can be connected over cellular and satellite with the embedded 100 milliamp hour battery. We have now connected everything from previous generation cellular asset trackers with a firmware update, connected e-bike helmets, all types of applications that can take advantage of this new capability, which frankly also unlocks automotive OEMs in a very important way in the years to come. And just to give you an idea of sort of battery life and form factor as we talk about it, on a 300 milliamp hour wearable form factor device, you're able to get about 1,000 satellite pings, which is only 5% less than cellular. In fact, you spend more battery life from your IoT device in cell search mode than actually connecting over our satellite network.
Guys, that's quite remarkable in terms of the power consumption. One thing that you mentioned at the beginning of that answer, or the beginning of your response there, was cattle tracking. You have 4 companies in terms of cattle tracking. Now that's a bit of a cluster there. What is it that drove that cluster?
Yeah, so they are actually using cellular. These are companies that in the past, they in some cases had to set up a private network. Farmland is massive, right? In America, there's average farm size 5,000, 10,000 hectares is not uncommon. And it's not always viable to put up a new cell site. So my argument is wherever the cell density is high enough, where subscriber density is high enough, you should use terrestrial. You should absolutely use the terrestrial network. But where the density of subscribers is not going to be high enough, it doesn't make economic sense to put up a cell site. The device should automatically switch to satellite. And these companies found themselves in geographies where, in many cases, more than 50% of the time, they didn't have access to a connection.
Yes, but it's interesting there's a cluster there that are so similar because it almost seems like one person has spotted a possibility to change something,
right.
And then others said, that's a good idea, and the ideas transmit through the market. It's not something you'd necessarily have seen when you come to that market cold. You need to be in that market to spot the opportunity, and other people say, that's a good idea,
Jim,
and it spreads like that.
You're exactly right. This is the benefit of standards. When you're part of the cellular standards, everyone can adopt.
Fantastic. I'd like to move on. I'd like to talk a little to Marco. I'd like to talk to you about whether the integration and whether the new standards actually simplify the technological aspects, and does that then manifest in tangible improvements in the customer experience?
Yes. Let's see. I really believe that the first point, thanks to satellite connectivity, is to offer a global coverage. That's create a different perception of the system. In our case, in Sateliot, for example, we approach the problem deploying low Earth orbit satellite. It means a satellite flying at 600 kilometers all around the globe. So there is no limit where the coverage is. When you start deploying your IoT solution, you don't have to think, I will have coverage in this country, in this continent, in the middle of the sea. With this approach, based on the standard always, 3GPP consider different kind of orbit, GEO, LEO, MEO, different kind of systems, all of them working under the same standard, create this ecosystem. With LEO, you can have a coverage, a global coverage around the globe. That's our approach. And then you can start seeing something like having a massive IoT deployed in your industry. You can start thinking in new application where maybe today you don't know, but artificial intelligence in the cloud, artificial intelligence in back office of your application will create new revenue stream, will create new perception of the service for the end customer. For example, I see hiking in the mountain with my pet. I can control my bicycle, I can control my pet. I can start thinking in a security reason. I want to bring my IoT with me for security. But later I can think starting sharing messages with my family. And after that I picture, and why not a call? So it's just a beginning of the perception of a new service is based on small messaging for IoT. But later, thanks to the standard again, we'll see impact on the real life, everyday life, connected everywhere globally from space.
Okay, so it sounds like an interesting and compelling future, but some things are going to have to change. You know, the way these industries work together, it's going to have to change and evolve. So, Steve, can you provide your perspective on how commercial models will need to evolve and change and expand and develop for operators to support satellite communications and to offer satellite communications as part of your offerings?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's something that we think a lot about. I think, you know, Parth said it best as well, right? Like, as you think about how folks are using it, and there's going to be areas where it's going to be, you know, the choice of connectivity in areas where we can't get cellular coverage, we got to think differently on how our customers are going to want to use it, right? And so, you know, I'll give 3 examples, but you know, in the automotive space, we're heavily involved, right? There's a lot going on in the cars as it relates to how they want to use them, whether it's through telemetry or just even as they think about, you know, just the entertainment stuff and things that they want to do. And so as things advance, folks are on the road, you know, satellite coverage helps maintain connectivity continuously for folks that are driving. On the railways, we've got a lot going on from an infrastructure perspective, tons of sensors on those things that they use. They're coming to us and saying, hey, you know, can you help us make sure that our infrastructure is maintained properly, that we can have insights and visibility into these things? And satellite helps us do that as well when it gets into those motions. And also just in the tracking space where we drop things off and we might not have cellular coverage. So when you think about those types of use cases, we need multiple models. So really, you know, the answer is flexibility, right? So some of our customers want it bundled in with the service. They're just saying, hey, it's backup for us. So when we're using cellular, we want to be able to seamlessly flip over to satellite when it's required. We want that to just be part of the offering. In some areas, they might want to leverage it, and like you mentioned, it could be in an area where we don't have cellular coverage that's consistent, and so they need it, and they want it when they want it, and they're willing to be able to pay and think of more models where they can tap into it when they need it. And then some are just checking in regularly. So we have to be able to sit down with our customers and have multiple flexible models for them to take advantage of based on their use case and the outcome that they're looking for. You know, and so flexibility we're finding is what they're looking for. So that's what we'll continue to push for, and it'll evolve as we learn more too, right? Well, as we understand the consumption models, like, you know, battery and power management things. We need to make sure that we're thinking about things differently, and really on behalf of the customer to keep things flexible for them. So.
Yeah, so certainly flexibility is key, but and there's a use case based answer. But do you think we're ever going to get to the point where it's completely transparent, or the end user isn't even aware of the technology that's being used to connect their device? So you have pricing transparency, you have experience transparency. It just goes into the field and it works.
Yeah, I think that ties right back to the standards. That to me, that's a theme that just keeps coming back. If we can get to a point where things are standard, then these solutions and offerings can be very seamless and elegant for the customer. And to them, all they care about is the outcome and the experience, and shouldn't matter what they're leveraging for it. And so I think the models and things that we have would do that. But I think if we can get to the standards-based motion, then that's when we get to a point where we're exactly what you're asking for, which is, can we get seamless?
Just seamless connectivity.
Yeah. Think of it as roaming. Right? You're going from one network to another.
Yeah.
Handing off. Customer doesn't know, right? So.
Absolutely. And focusing a little more on how the two industries are going to work together. Jens, I mean, I guess different players will lead for different customers, or potentially in different segments, or potentially via different channels. How's that relationship going to work? Who's going to lead for which?
So if we assume that satellite and cell networks are converging, and it's possible to serve everything as one product to our customers, my position is that mobile network operators are best placed to do this, because we have a long experience with. We already do have an experience with what we call network of network. It's just, as you said, roaming on cellular networks. So we have a few hundred roaming partners. We know how to charge it and to operate it, and we will now extend it with satellite players as roaming partners. So specifically Skylo and Sateliot, amongst others. And so there will always, of course, be cases where there are long-term relationships between a satellite player and a particular customer in industries, such as maritime, for example, where the customer is happy to directly buy it from a satellite operator. But I think for a large chunk of customers, they would prefer a one-stop shop with maybe one connectivity management platform and a seamless service, and that's what we're targeting. For me, the good news is that as far as I'm concerned, to the satellite operators we're speaking to, they see it the same way. So they see a partnership with operators like us as an opportunity to reach a lot of customers, to sweat their assets, get a lot of volume actually utilized by customers based on our sales force, our market footprint.
Okay, and a question to everyone, really, about the channels to market. I mean, how much, I mean, you were saying that in many cases, mobile network operators are best placed to lead with opportunities. But typically, will it be end users who purchase these kind of solutions directly, so industrial end users, or will it, or will you be offering these solutions via channels to end users? Is there anyone who wants to take
I think maybe a key thing is it will not change towards compared to the business we're in today. So satellite will be maybe a special case of cellular connectivity. Maybe it's wrong terminology, but we will not have completely new business models or completely new sales channels as before. We do some of our business directly, some of our business indirectly with channel partners. So I think that's a key thing. It will converge. It will not be two separate worlds.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, when on the business side, at least, I mean, they're coming to us, they're buying solutions, they're buying outcomes, right? You know, I mean, obviously they're interested in how we architect it and how we show up for them, but at the end of the day, you know, they're coming to us because their intent is for a solution to be built for some outcome that they want, and they want it to be reliable, and they want it to work properly, and you know, our job to show up on behalf of them is to use the best technologies available to make sure that that happens. So the partnership makes that seamless for us.
Yes, in Sateliot we always use the same expression. We are a coverage extension of mobile operator. We are not here to compete, we are here to complete the coverage of mobile operator. And what we learn with our business intelligence team in Sateliot, that customer needs to rely on their partners locally. So coming from Barcelona and offering the service in Brazil is quite complicated. The right partner and the right way to reach the market is the local mobile operator. And after that, you have to consider another thing. IoT is not like selling just a connectivity. It's a solution. IoT is a solution. It's not machine-to-machine sending message at the other side of the network. It's a solution. This solution requires a valued service provider, requires an IoT provider, requires a service provider in IoT, specialized in a specific sector, for example, cattle management, for example, or logistics. So it's impossible for a satellite operator to reach that specificity. So mobile operator, valued service provider, IoT service provider, we can complete their offer just extending their coverage. That's our position in the value chain. That's clear.
Okay. I think, Jim, completely agree with all my fellow panelists. I think the winning formula here is to eliminate changes in user behavior for adoption, which means you maintain your existing relationship with your existing MNO, and we are simply a roaming partner to the carriers. That, to me, is the winning formula here, because you receive a single bill for satellite and cellular connectivity, and you frankly never even know when you're in cellular versus when you're in satellite.
So the answer here is that, the kind of summary answer is that there are going to be direct sales, there are going to be indirect sales. It really depends what's established in what market. So there's going to be business coming from many directions. It can be a complicated market. So the key is standardize it and make it easy for those guys just to pick it up and adopt it in the way that they're used to doing business. Thank you. And then moving on a little to more hardware considerations, spectrum considerations. Is the same spectrum available everywhere in the world, and will the same hardware work in all markets? Mm-hmm. Anybody want to say? Mark, do you want to?
Yes, maybe I can raise something on that. First of all, from the spectrum point of view, Into the 3GPP was working around the concept of mobile satellite spectrum. Okay, we are not creating new spectrum, we are not creating new bands. There is an organization that is called ITU that manages the spectrum in space. It's not like on the ground that you have a local government that assigns spectrum to a specific operator. So we have this spectrum, and this spectrum is well harmonized around the world. So we have, the world is divided in different regions. We have a spectrum that can work in all of these regions. Okay, so we have operator that can stay in this spectrum, can use this spectrum, so the solution can be easily connected everywhere in the world. That's an important point. But then there is the device. Here we have to use this panel to encourage the device developer to push on that aspect. We have to create devices that support this spectrum. Of course, it's always happened. It's happening with 5G, it's happening with 4G. So devices today support different band, different spectrum. For MSS, we have L-band, we have S-band. Let's work on this spectrum. It's simple, it's not complicated, it's just a part of the front end, something that they use to do everywhere. Now we have 4 chip vendors that are working already on non-terrestrial network release 17. We are starting seeing devices in the market, but it's true that satellite operator, mobile operator have to push into the GCF organization like GCF or PTs, RCB in the United States to facilitate the certification of the device. So it's very, very important to speed up the introduction of devices in the market, because if not, coverage is there, but there is no application. Okay.
Thank you. Parth, I think you want to add.
Yeah, building on what Marco said, exactly right. So there's 3GPP recognizes 2 MSS bands for global connectivity, band 255 and 256 LNS band. And we require a certification of devices and chipsets on both these bands for global access. And we have now also integrated our certification cases. You know, Cameron was talking about how important certification is for predictability. We have integrated our certification test cases inside the test equipment from Keysight, Rohde & Schwartz, and Ritsu, allowing the ecosystem and the industry to take advantage of existing test equipment and processes which are already in place for the cellular IoT industry.
Thank you. Other thoughts, Jens, Steve?
Yeah, listen, I agree with everything they said. From at least from my perspective, our ability to just make sure that the device and the network work seamlessly, and the certification for us would be the key, right? Just to make sure that the experience the customer maintains is very consistent. So we'll just continue to partner and make sure that we not only continue to align on what's right for the end test cases for the cert with the device and the network, but also just make sure that it's streamlined and it actually gets easier and easier into the process. So I think that would be our focus, to just make sure that it makes it seamless to get we want the device ecosystem to get moving. That's the key, right? Because I think, you know, the network and everything's great, but if we don't have the devices out there to operate on it, then it's kind of a failed proposition. So our goal is to make sure we get devices on the network.
Okay, thank you. And at that point, my little counter's gone orange. It said 3 minutes left, so 45 seconds. Any closing thoughts? Parth, do you want to go first?
Sure. Jim, on closing, I think I'm really delighted to share here with this audience that we have now completed our core-to-core integration with Deutsche Telekom, and are announcing commercial service go live. So please stop by the Deutsche Telekom booth later today, for Jens and myself will be talking about what this means. And also excited to share that we are now live in 4 continents, North America, Europe, and we have, as of today, turned online Australia, New Zealand, and Japan as well.
Fantastic, thank you. It seems appropriate to go in a slightly odd order, and Jens, maybe you should summarize next.
Yeah, so thank you, Parth. So for us, it's also a beginning of a new era. So we launched a commercial product with Skylo, as far as I know, the first ever commercially available NB-IoT product that works in space. We've got Sateliot and IoT Technology lined up as further roaming partners. When we talk about NTN, let's not forget it's not always only about narrowband. We also need to fulfill the needs of customers requiring higher data rates. That's why we're also partnering with people like Intelsat and Viasat. So we also have a commercial product live with Intelsat. That does not mean device convergence yet. That means actually a separate device, but still there's convergence on the service and the connectivity management layer. So, and looking forward to the new 5G, new radio standards, eventually also allowing converged devices for higher data rates than narrowband.
Okay, thank you. Marco, closing thoughts?
Yes, so see all of you to the next launch of our satellite in this year in June, for satellite for the first orbital plane, SSO, around the world, and start spreading the service for our potential customers. Here.
Fantastic, really getting traction. Thank you. Steve, final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to be up here, and appreciate the time to chat with colleagues. You know, for Verizon, what I'm excited about is just the promise of the future of the technology. And so, you walk the floor, you talk to partners, you're seeing what's happening in the space. This just extends out the possibilities, right? And so we want to be a big part of that. And for us, the solutioning and the use cases, they're endless, right? And it's not just about IoT. There's many other things we can do with broadband and access as well. So I think the combination of cellular satellite is going to do big things for the industry and for our mutual customers.
Yes, thank you. I think there's a world of new opportunities out there with this newfound ability to have things connected basically wherever they are and just be able to send out little signals of data saying, I am here, I am working, I have got a battery, and just simple messages like that are really going to change some, certainly industrial use cases and also personal safety, so in the case of cycle helmets and so on and so forth. At that point, we're out of time, I'm afraid. So I'd like to thank my panelists, Steve, Jens, Marco, and Parth, and thank you all for listening to us.